A Green Beret survives years of military training, overseas service, and the kind of experiences most people could never imagine. Then he comes home to a quiet suburb outside Salt Lake City, to his wife, his 3 children, and the house he owned before the marriage began. From the outside, Matthew Johnson's life looked settled. He had served in the Marines, spent roughly 12 years with the Utah Army National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group, and built a reputation among fellow soldiers as intelligent, dependable, and unexpectedly funny. He was the person people turned to when they needed an answer, a man who seemed to define himself through his family, his friends, and his role as a father. But by 2024, the picture had changed. Matthew and Jennifer Gledhill's marriage was breaking apart. Arguments over their home and custody were escalating, and Jennifer had begun seeing another man. On August 21, she obtained a temporary protective order against Matthew. Less than a month later, that order was not made permanent. 5 days after that decision, Matthew would disappear. What followed was not simply a missing person case. It became an investigation filled with contradictory stories, suspicious movements, recorded conversations, and a trail of evidence that would eventually lead prosecutors to accuse Jennifer of killing her husband. The marriage had once looked ordinary. Jennifer and Matthew had 3 children, a large suburban house, dogs, a family minivan, and grandparents nearby to help with childcare. But beneath that normal appearance, the relationship was deteriorating. By March 2024, Jennifer had moved out, and on July 3, Matthew's 51st birthday, she filed for divorce. The dispute quickly became complicated. They disagreed over the ownership of the house and fought over custody of their children. According to messages later reviewed by Matthew's attorney, Jennifer was often described as provoking confrontations, while Matthew repeatedly asked to be left alone. Jennifer's attorney strongly disputed that characterization, and the allegations surrounding their relationship remained contested. At the same time, Jennifer had become involved with another man, identified publicly only as the informant. Their relationship would become one of the most important pieces of the prosecution's case. According to later warrants, Jennifer also asked her father for $13,000 and then requested his credit card information, although the public record does not explain why. Then came September 16. A court commissioner declined to make Jennifer's protective order permanent, saying the evidence presented that day did not meet the legal standard, while describing both Jennifer and Matthew as confrontational. Whatever anyone believed about the marriage, the legal dispute was still unresolved. Then, 5 days later, Matthew Johnson was gone. According to Jennifer's later account to police, the night of September 20 began very differently from the story prosecutors would eventually tell. She said she and Matthew drank whiskey, had sex, and then argued after Matthew confronted her about her affair. Jennifer later claimed that Matthew became physically aggressive and that she had bruises to support her account, but prosecutors presented another version, based heavily on statements from the confidential informant. According to him, Jennifer said she had shot Matthew with his own Glock while he was asleep. She allegedly told him that she moved Matthew's truck, destroyed his phone, and used the family's rooftop cargo container to transport him. The next morning, surveillance footage allegedly showed Matthew's truck being left about 1/3 of a mile from the house, with his phone still inside. Then investigators began reconstructing Jennifer's movements through cell phone data. On September 22, her phone was near the abandoned truck location early in the morning, later traveled north, and then disappeared from the network for roughly 2.5 hours. When it returned, Jennifer made another call to her father. Surveillance later allegedly captured her minivan in the Centerville area. Prosecutors say this timeline corresponds with the period when Matthew was allegedly transported and buried, although the exact sequence remains part of the evidence that will ultimately be tested in court. That same evening, Jennifer's minivan appeared on surveillance at a car wash. She remained there for roughly 30 minutes, opening the doors and cleaning the vehicle. Later that night, she arrived at the informant's home. He said she was emotionally distraught and began telling him what had allegedly happened. According to his account, she described the shooting, the truck, the cargo container, the drive north, and the burial. He said she appeared frightened and spoke about running away. He did not immediately contact police because, by his own later explanation, he wasn't certain whether he believed her. Instead, he began preserving evidence-saving screenshots after portions of their WhatsApp conversation were deleted, and eventually secretly recording their phone calls. 3 days later, Jennifer's parents arrived at the house. Neighbors reportedly saw them there for several hours, and Jennifer's mother purchased a replacement mattress that same day. Her father later told investigators he had come because of a leak in the garage, and said he had not entered the room where the alleged incident occurred. Then, on September 25, the Utah National Guard contacted police because Matthew had failed to report for duty. For people who knew him, that was deeply unusual. His children had already stopped hearing from him, yet Jennifer did not report Matthew missing until September 28, telling police that after their argument he had left and said he might be gone for about a week. Investigators later noted that she had not attempted to call him after September 21. By October 2, Jennifer Gledhill was under arrest. Investigators searching the home found what prosecutors described as signs of an extensive cleanup: a new mattress, wiped walls, reddish-brown staining on parts of the bedroom, bleach discoloration on the staircase, a smell of bleach in the basement, and a carpet cleaning machine. Testing of carpet beneath the area where the head of the bed had been reportedly came back positive for human blood from a male source. Inside the minivan, police also found separately packaged material believed to be psilocybin mushrooms, along with cash, leading prosecutors to add a controlled substance charge. The consequences extended far beyond the courtroom. Jennifer was cut off from her 3 children, who were placed temporarily into state custody and later with relatives. On October 15, prosecutors filed 9 felony counts, including first-degree murder, obstruction charges, abuse or desecration of a human body, witness tampering, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. 9 days later, Jennifer's parents were also arrested on suspicion of helping conceal evidence. Investigators said a box for a Glock 19X was discovered at their home, hidden inside one of the grandchildren's onesies. The firearm itself was never recovered. Then, months into the investigation, something prosecutors considered critical surfaced. By February 2025, the missing rooftop cargo container had been discovered in a Davis County wetland, apparently after a storm. Testing reportedly found Matthew's blood inside it. Around the same time, laboratory results confirmed that blood found beneath the bed in the Cottonwood Heights home matched Matthew Johnson. The significance was enormous. Investigators still did not have Matthew's body, but they now had biological evidence connecting him to the bedroom and the recovered container described in the informant's account. At a February 28 detention hearing, prosecutors played portions of Jennifer's recorded conversations with the informant. According to prosecutors, she pleaded with him not to see her as a monster and spoke about Matthew in the past tense. They also referenced a separate video showing Jennifer and Matthew arguing before his disappearance. The judge denied her release, and Jennifer remained in custody. But legally, the case was still far from finished. Jennifer had pleaded not guilty to all 9 counts, and there was still no body, no recovered murder weapon, and no autopsy. That is what makes this case so difficult and so important to approach carefully. Prosecutors call it a no-body homicide case. They must convince a jury through circumstantial and testimonial evidence rather than an autopsy. Their argument is built around pieces that appear to converge: Matthew's blood beneath the bed, his blood inside the recovered cargo container, the abandoned truck, the unexplained period when Jennifer's phone went offline, the late-night car wash, the replacement mattress, and the informant's account of events. Individually, each piece might have another explanation. Together, prosecutors argue, they form a much larger picture. But the defense has significant questions to raise. Matthew's body has never been found. The firearm has never been recovered. There is no bullet and no autopsy establishing a cause or time of death. There are also timeline inconsistencies in the investigative affidavit, including conflicting dates connected to the abandoned truck and Jennifer's phone location. A neighbor reportedly described hearing an argument during a period that does not perfectly match either side's account. And although investigators recovered a mattress, pillows, and rug from a location connected to Jennifer's phone, the defense pointed out that blood or DNA results from those specific items had not been presented at the February hearing. There is another layer to the case, but it must be handled carefully. There is no public psychological evaluation that allows anyone to diagnose Jennifer, and no responsible outsider can determine her mental state from courtroom evidence alone. What the prosecution has presented, however, is a striking contrast in the alleged behavior after Matthew disappeared. The informant described Jennifer as capable of methodically cleaning the minivan, and then appearing emotionally overwhelmed later that same night. He said she cried, confessed, and desperately worried about how he would see her. That contrast raises questions, but it does not answer them. Was the emotion genuine remorse, fear of consequences, self-preservation, or some complicated mixture of all three? Even Jennifer's later letter to the judge, in which she apologized for taking up his time and said she was trying to handle everything as best she could, cannot provide a definitive answer. It was not a confession, and ultimately, the meaning of those actions belongs not to commentators, but to the evidence presented in court. In February 2025, Jennifer had already waived her right to a preliminary hearing and maintained her not guilty plea. Her trial was originally scheduled for December 2025, then postponed to June 2026, and later delayed again because another murder case required priority with the same judge and prosecutor. As of the transcript's latest update, jury selection is scheduled for December 7, 2026, with trial proceedings expected to continue through December 16. Until then, the central mystery remains unresolved. Where is Matthew Johnson, and what exactly happened inside that suburban home? The defense has emphasized that Matthew was a highly trained former Special Forces soldier, theoretically capable of surviving circumstances that might overwhelm an ordinary missing person, but that argument must confront another reality. Matthew has not contacted his children, his military community, or the people who knew him since the night he disappeared. The prosecution, meanwhile, must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt without the one piece of evidence. Homicide cases usually depend upon the victim's body. That tension sits at the heart of everything that comes next. For now, Jennifer Gledhill remains in custody and is presumed innocent under the law. Matthew Johnson remains missing. What investigators have recovered is a trail: blood in the bedroom, blood in a recovered cargo container, a truck left behind, a phone that went silent, a vehicle cleaned late at night, a replacement mattress, recorded conversations, and an informant whose testimony may become one of the prosecution's most important pieces of evidence. But evidence is not the same as a verdict, and allegations are not the same as proven facts. The courtroom will eventually have to decide what these fragments mean when placed together. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of Matthew Johnson's disappearance. His life had been built around service, family, friendship, and being present for the people who depended on him. Then, almost overnight, that presence vanished. No funeral, no confirmed recovery of his body, no final goodbye to his children, just an empty space where a husband, father, soldier, and friend used to be. The answers may finally come when jury selection begins in December 2026. But until then, Matthew Johnson remains missing, and the story of what happened to him remains an accusation waiting to be tested in court.